Hey, it's Kenny Burdine. Good to be with you and be part of Grazing Conference again. I'm going to share some thoughts I've got on risk management strategies for forage and livestock-related enterprises. So I'm going to go ahead and share a presentation and go from there. I'm going to take a pretty broad view on this. And by doing that, I'm going to start with just some basic strategies, and those are going to be more cattle-related things that kind of focus on just selling what the market wants. That's kind of be number one. And then I want to talk a little bit about livestock risk protection insurance. I'm trying to talk about that more, given that it's a little more attractive now, given some of the subsidy levels that have changed over the last few months. Then I'll end up by talking about pasture, rangeland, and forage insurance, which I think is probably the thing that fits the best with what this actual topic was that I was asked to cover. This is just kind of a quick intro, and it's not a traditional risk management topic, but I think we've got to understand that one of the ways we can insulate ourselves from any sort of risk, whether it be, a market risk, a health risk, or most anything, is we just do a better job doing what we do at the core, and that's using forage to add pounds. So pounds are profits. So that's a function of both forage quality and utilization, and just do a good job putting pounds on cattle. Again, it's not a risk management topic, but someone with a lower cost of production can almost always manage through a more challenging market, more challenging issues than someone who didn't. Also know what the market is offering and rewarding. And, every Friday I always pull down the state summary market report from the Department of Agriculture, from USDA AMS, and highlight a few things. And so this one's actually from last Friday. So it's from the last Friday before I recorded this. So when you see this, it'll actually be about a week old. But I'm going to circle a couple of things here. So I'm going to look at those steers in that 500 to 550 pound weight range. I want to point out two things. The top price here, that's 137.50 to 100 weight. Okay, that's for cattle that are nondescript, so no descriptor by those cattle. The bottom, 146.73, those are cattle that have got the descriptor value added. When our market reporters use the term value added by cattle, that's their way of signaling something, and they typically use that to signal value-added cattle are those that have been weaned. So they're not green calves. They've been weaned. They've had typically at least one shot of some type. So bottom line is these are weaned calves, not green calves. I want you to notice there's about a $9 hundredweight difference in price between those green calves and those weaned calves. Exact same thing. Here's that 6 to 650 range. Again, I've got about an $8 difference in what those value-added calves are versus those green fresh off the cow calves. This is not uncommon at all for fall. And as we move closer to winter and potential changes for weather, more potential for sickness, we typically do see more reward for folks that actually sell preconditioned and weaned calves. So know that going in, and there's typically market rewards for that. Again, this is a risk management strategy as you're kind of insulating your price somewhat from the overall market. I wear this slide out, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time. If you follow me at all, you've probably seen this 5 or 10 times. But again, when we start thinking about things we can do to deal with risk, one of those things is we try to maximize price to the extent possible. A lot of things are outside of our control with the cattle market. But I love this slide because it really illustrates a key point with small cattle producers. So some work that Greg and I did back in 2015, it uses 7 or 8 years worth of preconditioned feeder cattle sales in Kentucky. And what this two-dimensional chart is simply showing is what is the price differential or the price benefit as lot size increases. So here, bottom left, the origin, it's actually not 0, 0. That is a lot size of 1. So that's my base. Okay, a lot size of 1, no price premium. That's the base. On the far right here, this is roughly a truckload lot. The weight on these calves was average like 620 or something like that. So that's a truckload lot. If we could all sell truckload lots, we would, because truckload lots on average in this study sold for $21 a hundredweight more than singles. But very few of us can do that. But one thing we can control is the uniformity of our cattle, how they sort up, how uniform they are, and just understand how much difference even a little bit of an increase in lot size makes in terms of price, especially on the left side here. So group of 5 outsells a single by $11 a hundredweight. Group of 10 outsells a 5 by $4 a hundredweight. The real message here is I don't have to be selling truckloads of cattle to get a good chunk of the price benefit for larger lot sizes. even moving from selling singles, twos, and threes to selling groups of 5 and 10 can make a really big difference on what your cattle sell for. And again, so we kind of isolate ourselves from market impacts. Last thing I'll talk about in terms of this, what the market wants is just this simple notion of bulls versus steers. But there's 10 years of data here. This is for bull price and steer price at a 550-pound break. So I'm averaging the 5 to 550s and 550 to 600 pounds to get this for both groups. There wasn't a single month in this 120-month period when the average price of a bull at that weight was higher than the average price of a steer at that weight. Doesn't mean there weren't times when a group outsold another, and that does happen sometimes. But on average, there's a pretty big difference. It's $11.20 per hundredweight difference. So if we assume the same weight at the 550, that's between $61 and $62 per head difference in that steer calf versus that bull calf. Now, a lot of folks ask, won't bulls outweigh steers? And the answer is they may well. But I always like to point out just how much more those bulls have to weigh than those steers to compensate for that market price differential. And with pounds being worth another dollar, additional pounds worth $1 a pound, that's 62 pounds. That bull has to outweigh that steer by at 80 cents. And the market right now is kind of between these two in terms of additional value of additional pounds. That bull's got to outweigh that steer by 77 pounds. So that's a tall task. And then, of course, we're all aware of this, but unless you're in a market that precludes it and you're being paid to sell natural cattle, then you've got the option of, selling implant steer calves and getting the weight gain from the implant and get the price of the steer. So again, know what the market wants and take advantage of what's out there. I want to talk a little bit about price risk, and I'm going to just illustrate it very simply. This is not a current budget. This is something I put together back in probably late March, early April. But this was my estimate for summer stocker returns for calves placed in April that would be sold about this time of year. At the time, the 550-pound steer was selling for about $1.45. He's really not far from that right now. Now, what has changed at the time, remember this was just into the pandemic. I was ballparking an 850-pound steer using futures at about $1.26 a pound. A group would certainly outsell that number by quite a bit right now. I want you to focus on the bottom line. And what I want you to know is that at the time when I was putting this together, I was estimating a return to land, labor, and capital, or land capital management, of about $86 a head. And again, go back, if I'm projecting an expected sale weight of 850 pounds, what that means is if that sale price drops by 10 cents a pound, if that 126 goes to 116, I've basically lost all my profit. And I think we just need to be cognizant of the fact that there's a lot of risks out there in this, these livestock forage enterprises, but probably none more so than market risk. Managing it becomes very important. I spent a lot of time in my career talking about futures and options, and I'll continue to do that for probably the next 20 years of my career. But one of the downsides of using futures and options is that we are locked into 50,000 pound quantities. That's what a futures contract is. LRP insurance works very much like a put option. You're buying an insurance policy that pays you if the CME index, which by the way is the same index used to cash settle feeder cattle futures contracts, you're buying a policy that pays you if that index is below a certain level on a specified day, the ending date of that insurance policy. So it works like a put option. So if I buy coverage that pays me if the CME index is below $1.30, and if the index on the ending date ends up being $1.20, then I get 10 cents a pound compensation for those cattle that I protected. It's a bit less flexible than a put option, and that's one reason why when it first came out I didn't push folks quite that way as much. But it's always been the only thing we've had that really was geared towards smaller operations. And the beauty of LRP insurance is I can buy it on 10, 20, 30 head of cattle. I'm not locked into that truckload lot, 50,000 pounds that I am with CME futures and options. The other reason why I didn't push folks too much towards LRP when it first came out is because the subsidy was about 13%. And I thought the lack of flexibility probably, offset the fact that it might have been a little bit cheaper, and I never was convinced it really was, but they've really increased the subsidy levels to try and make it more attractive. So if you buy coverage at 95% or higher, and another way to think about that is there's an expected ending value for the CME index for every policy. And if you choose to cover within 95% of that, in other words, you're saying I'm going to self-insure the first 5% of that market drop, kind of like a deductible, that's subsidized at 35%. And if you buy lower coverage levels, meaning if I'm willing to self-insure more, pay more deductible, it gets as high as 55%. So bottom line, if you've looked at LRP insurance in the past and decided not to buy it, just understand it's more attractive now than it used to be because they've really ratcheted up those subsidy levels. So I would definitely give it a look. It's a good way to get some price protection. You can buy it in small quantities if you so wish. I want to spend the balance of the presentation talking about what I think probably fits the best with this particular topic. Pasture, rangeland, and forage insurance have been available here in Kentucky since 2015. So we're, I guess, in our fifth or sixth offering year for this product. It's not perfect. No insurance product is. I don't know what the future of it's going to be like, but I do want to make sure that you're aware of it. It is being sold right now for the 2021 calendar year. You can buy it through November 15th. What LRP insurance does, it really provides insurance coverage for less than normal rainfall during a period of time. It's done on a grid basis. So it's done on a quarter latitude by quarter longitude grid. That's roughly 17 miles by 17 miles at the equator. And I've got normal in the quotes there. Normal is defined as back to 1940. So basically from 1948 to the previous year. So the historical normal go back to 1948. And the idea is if you get less than normal rainfall, this product will compensate you for that, and which should show up in the form of less hay production or less pasture growth. I'm just showing you what one of these grids look like, and I just grabbed a presentation from something I gave back in 2018. So this is from Muhlenberg County. I was down there doing a program with my buddy Daryl Simpson. I don't even know when it was. Sometime I think summer 2018. So when I was there that night, I just showed that particular group, here's what the grids might look like. And I kind of highlighted the one right there in Greenville where I was standing when I was giving that program 2 years ago. I want you to understand that there's, most counties will have anywhere from, 4 to 6 grids that might cover that county. That's kind of what they look like. You can buy LRP insurance through your insurance type agents. I think one reason why a lot of producers like LRP insurance, or I'm sorry, I'm getting acronyms mixed up. You can buy PRF insurance through insurance agents. So they won't all necessarily offer it, but I think one reason why folks like it is because they may have a relationship with someone who sells them, crop type insurance or something. So you can kind of start with those people. And if they don't sell it, they can get you with somebody that probably would. So talking about PRF insurance, I apologize. The way the product works, it uses the 4 closest weather stations to the center of that grid to extrapolate rainfall for that grid. So understand that it's going to estimate rainfall for that 17 mile by 17 mile grid, and that's what everything's based on. You're ensuring rainfall on that grid, not at your farm. So what you're really doing when you do this is you're making the assumption that rainfall on your farm should roughly match, or at least pretty closely match, what you would see on that grid. And this has been the source of a lot of questions about PRF from the very beginning is how well is that really going to work? Because if it doesn't work, then it raises some questions about how well it's going to manage risk in terms of reduced rainfall. So you're insuring historical rainfall for that grid in 2-month periods. And most folks understand how indices work. That's all this is. But, an index is just like an average over time. And an index of 100 means right at average. So you can insure 70 to 90% of average rainfall in 5% increments. So simple example here, if normal rainfall, again, defining that going back to 1948, for the June and July 2-month period were 10 inches, if that were normal, and if in the current year we got 12 inches during those 2 months on that grid, that would be an index of 120, meaning 120% of normal or 20% above normal. And if I bought 90% coverage, I don't receive indemnity there because I got more rainfall than I was covered for. If I got 10 inches, that's right at normal. That's 100. That's normal rainfall. Again, if I buy 90%, I don't get any indemnity there. If instead I get 6 inches during that 2-month period, that's 60% of normal. If I bought 90%, then I'm 30% below my coverage, the 90% coverage, and I'm going to receive indemnity. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how the actual payments and values work, but this is just the concept of how the actual indices work. Just think percent of normal. Okay, so 106, 6% above normal. 84, 16% below normal. Get that in your head. I'm going to now show you some historical indices, and I just grabbed the indices for Southern Woodford County, which is where I actually play farmer. And we've bought PRF insurance now, I think for 3 straight years. We did collect on it last year, in fact, in 2019. And I want to point you to a couple things. So if you remember, it got really dry in a lot of the state, definitely where we run cattle in late 2019. So that July-August 2-month period, index was 77.5%. So it was 22.5% below normal rainfall for those 2 months. It was really dry in September as well, and we actually covered this 2-month period. But the August-September 2-month period was 38.2% of normal. So one thing you can do is go in and look at the grid that your farm would be in and pull this up for these months. And you probably will kind of remember the last few years and just say, okay, do the dry and wet patterns match what I saw on my farm reasonably well? And that's one thing I encourage you to do, because one of the big questions is, this is going to be most effective if the grid estimated rainfall matches your farm. So you can do that. That's kind of what I'm showing you here. But sure enough, we were definitely very dry last August and September. So that at least passed the smell test for us. The other piece of this to understand is how the values are determined, and understand they're set through RMA. So they're going to vary a little bit based on location and based on what the crop is that we're dealing with. I'm going to focus on grazing here, and I've rounded these to somewhat whole numbers, but for the area that we were in, grazing value is something around $70 an acre. It may be more, it may be less in some counties. Haying value, which I won't talk about, same area, around $216 an acre. Okay, so these are kind of the base value. And it's almost hard to think about what these mean. Just understand this is the value that's going to be used to determine how much you get paid based on how much below your coverage you actually receive in terms of rain. And I'll do an example in just a minute on that. You also have the ability to scale that base value up or down. So if I wanted to cover grazing ground at less than $70 an acre, I can scale it down by multiplying it by as little as 60%. I can also scale it up, and that's what I'm going to do in this example. I'm going to take that $70 per acre value, scale it up by 150%, and my new value per acre is $105 per acre. And again, I can buy coverage to ensure 70 to 90% of these, and most folks are going to cover something on the upper end of that. A lot of folks ask, why would I not scale up? And I do actually advocate that in most cases, but understand premiums are paid per basically dollar of coverage. So, if you scale at 50%, you're going to pay more premium. But on the same note, you're going to receive more indemnity if indemnity is going to be received if you scale up too. So just understand that what you pay does scale up with value and coverage level. Make sure you understand this piece. This is probably the second most important slide that I'm going to share with you here tonight. You have to choose at least 2 2-month periods. You can choose more, but you have to choose at least 2. You cannot have any overlaps, and you're going to allocate your percent of coverage in those 2-month periods. You can have no more than 60% in any one of those. Okay, so let me show you what we did the last few years, and probably we'll do this for 2021 as well. We are most concerned about the summer and early fall grazing period. So we put coverage in June and July. and then coverage in August and September. So those are the only two-month periods that we chose. We chose to put 50% coverage here and 50% here. So we split it evenly across that June-July couplet and August-September couplet. We could have done 60-40. We could have covered, 2 additional months somehow had we wanted to. So, for example, we could have covered April, May, June, July, August, September. We could have covered 3 2-month periods. For that matter, there's nothing that says we couldn't have put equal coverage in all 12 months by doing, January, February, March, April, so on. But again, we chose to focus on the 4 months we were most concerned about. So we chose to start coverage in June, end in September, and just put equal coverage in the 2 2-month periods. When I mention overlap, all I mean is you couldn't double cover July. I couldn't put half my focus in June, July, and half my focus in July and August. I'm essentially double covering July, and so you cannot have overlap. So I have to cover 2 2-month periods for a total of 4 months. Now, these next 2 slides are going to be probably the most important because I'm going to actually walk you through how this would work. So, simple scenario, I'm using 100 acres, that makes the math easy, all right? I'm going to assume that I bought 90% coverage on grazing ground with a base value of $70 an acre, and again, that's going to vary by county and location. I'm going to assume I went ahead and bought up coverage, and I bought the full $105 an acre value. So I scaled up by $150 on the productivity factor. I'm going to say I did just what we did last year. Okay, I'm going to select June, July, August, and September as my 2 2-month periods. And we're going to place 50% emphasis on both of those. Now, here's the part to make sure you follow. The easiest way for me to explain this is to think about, okay, for the year, I've got $105 per acre of value here. By splitting it 50-50 in these 2 2-month periods, it's like I take that $105 and split it, and I put $52.50 in June, July, and $52.50 in August, September. That's the easiest way for me to think about it and make sense of it and kind of relate it to you. Okay, so I'm just splitting the $105 into my 2 2-month periods that I chose to use. Obviously, if I'm going to cover 3 2-month periods, then I'm going to allocate that differently. In addition to premium, you're going to pay a $30 administrative fee by county and crop. So crop, what that would mean is if you covered both pasture ground and hay ground, I'll pay the $60 twice. If you got multiple counties, you pay it in each county too. So I'm making the assumption I'm just covering grazing ground in one county here in this particular scenario. Now, I can go into the online tool and look at what premiums would have been in the past, and that's all that I've done. So understand, I'm not telling you what you can buy this for. I'm not telling you I can even buy this for where I play farm or Southern Woodford County, okay? I'm just telling you that this was about what it would have cost in the past for that particular grid. So this is just an estimate. The only way to get an actual quote would be to go through an insurance agent. But the total premium, if I were paying it all for doing this per acre, would be $10.75. And again, that's on a $105 value per acre. With the subsidy, which is fairly significant on this, I'm actually going to pay $5.27. Okay, so my cost to participate and enroll 100 acres in this program at this level, I'm going to pay $527 in premium. That's $5.27 an acre times my 100 acres. I'm going to pay a $30 administrative fee, so I'm going to have a cost of $557. Now, I don't pay that up front. It's not paid until the fall. And my gains can potentially offset that if I do collect earlier in the year. But essentially, I've agreed to pay $557 in this scenario. Again, these are estimates from the online tool. It's going to vary. You can see someone about your location this year and your grid to see what you would actually be quoted for something similar. But these are going to be reasonable, I think, going forward. I'm going to show you now what would happen if I actually were to receive an indemnity. So I'm going to stack the cards, okay? We've bought 90% coverage. We've covered that June, July, and August, September time period. That's 50% in both. And now we're going to say, okay, what would happen if I did, in fact, get less than normal rainfall? So first of all, let's assume that June, July index came in at 80%. So that means we were 20% below normal. Again, The easiest way that I can think about explaining this is say, okay, I had covered myself at 90%. Actual rainfall came in at 80%, so I was 10% below that 90% level. So I had put $52.50 worth of my emphasis in that 2-month period. I'm 10% below my coverage. So the indemnity for that 2-month period is going to be the $52.50 times 10% is going to be $5.25. That's what I'm going to receive in indemnity for June, July. 2 months later, I get the final index for August, September. Now let's say it's 60%. It got even drier. So rainfall was 40% below normal. Now I'm 30% below my 90% coverage. So 90% minus 60% is 30%. At $52.50 an acre, that's $15.75 for this August-September 2-month period. Put those together. $5.25 plus $15.75. That's $21 an acre. Again, it's a 100-acre scenario, so it's $2,100 in indemnity. Simple math, net gain on the insurance. I would have collected, based on these assumptions, $2,100 in indemnity. I spent $557 in premium plus administrative fee. My net gain this year would be $1,543. Now, again, I said I stacked the cards. I assumed that we got indemnity in both of those 2-month periods. Had rainfall been above 90% of normal in both 2-month periods, then I would have simply been out my $557 premium. Okay, so this is how it would work if I received indemnity. Just simple scenario here. I am going to be upfront with you about the way this is structured and set up. This is from RMA's website. PowerPoint presentation that they make available, and I just screenshotted it for you. But I want you to know that the premium subsidies on these are pretty significant. At the higher coverage levels that most folks tend to buy, at the 9% level, the premium subsidy is 51%. On the lower end, we're talking 59%. Okay, so another way to say that is you're not paying the full cost of what you would have to pay if an insurance company truly had to price it, to kind of break you. It's kind of a way to think about it. Okay, so you're paying a lower subsidy than the market would actually dictate, given the likelihood of payout. So when we start thinking about PRF, that's something to keep in the back of your mind. I'm going to come to it in just a second and talk about what it means in terms of how attractive it may be to you. First of all, understand that PRF really is a single peril insurance. It covers one thing, and that one thing is a lack or below average rainfall. It does not deal with excess rain whatsoever. It also doesn't deal with timing issues, and I think that's a key point to understand. If normal rainfall for a 2-month period were 8 inches, and you got 8 inches in the months that you had insured, but all 8 inches, for that 2-month period came in the first week, that's not good, right? But it would not trigger indemnity either because you got normal rainfall within that 2-month period. There's also this basis question. How good does rainfall? How well, I should say, does rainfall on your farm match rainfall on the grid? This is going to work best from a risk perspective if that grid rainfall matches your farm pretty closely. And there's a lot of questions about that. And frankly, 17 miles is a long way. So, you see a lot of spotty showers in the summer that can absolutely affect this. Be aware, like a lot of insurance products, it's unlikely to fully replace lost revenue. And the easiest way to think about this for me is just think about, that total value, the $105 in our example. How many of you would take $105 or more accurately 90% of $105 in exchange for having 0 rain for 4 straight months? Well, none of us would do that, right? So it's not going to make you whole, but it is a relatively inexpensive way to get some moisture coverage. And I can tell you, in our case, in 2019, it certainly helped offset some of the the pasture loss from the dry weather that we had in the late summer and early fall that year. There's a lot of different approaches on choosing which months to cover. I shared with you kind of that what we chose to do was cover the months that we were most concerned about forage growth, because we looked at it strictly from a risk management perspective. very seldom is rainfall an issue for us in April and May. We typically have enough forage in April and May. By June, things can start to change. And, obviously, July, August are oftentimes our more concerning months. This may differ for pasture and hay ground, right? Maybe you do worry more about spring on pasture ground than you do, more about spring on hay ground than pasture ground. So think about what makes the most sense from a risk management perspective. I think it makes sense to cover the months that you're most concerned about. I also want to be upfront with you about this, and that's why I showed the premium subsidies. Because of that subsidy, over time, the expected indemnity should exceed the premium. In fact, it should be about 2 to 1 over time. Doesn't mean they'll pay every year. In fact, it won't. But in other words, if you did this for 10 straight years, I think odds are that you would receive about twice as much in indemnity as premium simply because of that premium subsidy. So do be aware of that. That makes it a lot more attractive. And frankly, that may skew coverage months some. I'm not an advocate of it, but there are folks that kind of tend to look at, okay, maybe I want to cover some months that I'm much less worried about just to kind of spread this out and maybe get a better probability of receiving payment. So it's there. My philosophy is think about risk management first, but I'm fully aware that given the subsidy that there may be some different ways to think about trying to structure this and enroll in it. Because of the subsidy, and because I think that in these really dry years, the cost of lost forage and replacing that with some sort of feed, hay, or something like that can be high. I would definitely think about scaling up. In fact, we did scale up the last 2 years. But I do think it's an attractive enough product and interesting enough. I don't know what the future of it is, but I would give it a serious look. No insurance product is perfect, and there's basis risk, no question about it. I hear folks tell me all the time that they didn't receive an indemnity that they should have, or received one didn't expect it. But I do think it's worth consideration. It's out there, and rainfall is a concern in almost all of these forage-related livestock enterprises, which I'm sure is why I was asked to talk about this topic here this evening. I'm going to end here and look forward to taking some questions and talking with you. Reach out to me anytime. I'm in the office just 1 or 2 days a week right now, so if you call my office, leave me a message, and I'll certainly call you back. Be reached at email. I can almost always return an email within 24 hours. And then if you're on Twitter, reach out to me on Twitter, follow me on Twitter. I'm at KY Cattle Econ. Thanks again for having me, and I look forward to some discussion now.